Hello, everyone. Glad you're here and not learning about the namespaces and YUI. Or Dojo. So just wanted to start off and say this is one of the best conferences that I've been to in the last week or two. So actually this year. You guys, the content here is wicked. I don't think anyone here has said Ajax and not been sort of sarcastic about it. I think everything that is going on in the JavaScript space is pretty exciting, and yeah, you guys all rock. So it's cool to be here. So I'm just going to quickly talk about Nitobi because they pay me, so that's important to me. It was founded in '98. It's 15 guys. It's a really small company. We're in Vancouver, which is Canada. We're an early player in JavaScript, Air, and lately we're really into the mobile web, which is something we think is going to be pretty big, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that. We have two main products. They're both open source, and they're both based on JavaScript. There's Complete UI, which is a set of user interface components, data grids, and rich controls, and that sort of thing. And then there's what I'm here to talk to you about today, PhoneGap. So, PhoneGap. I think I got back to the hotel last night at like 3 after eating an empanada, and I edited my slides, and I have no idea what I was thinking when I added this one, but it's pretty good, so. Oh yeah, that's right. So the mobile web is huge, and it's growing really fast. I think there was something like 300% growth in just the last month on queries on Google from an iPhone. That's insane. If there's 1 billion television sets and there's 2 billion web-enabled phones, that speaks to the opportunity. I don't need a bar chart to show you how much of an opportunity that is. But there's a problem right now with mobile devices, and that problem is best illustrated by a really complicated chart like this one, or a table. So there's obviously a lot of platform fragmentation. We've got the iPhone, which has Objective-C, which it is pretty cool as a language. I recommend learning it. I think it is interesting. You've got Android, which is also really cool, kind of a beautiful version of Java running inside of it called Dalvik, which is quite performant. It's just plain old Java objects, really simple to program against. There's BlackBerry's take on Java, which is about as easy to use as their keyboards, or their browser for that matter. Windows Mobile, whatever. Nokia is actually really cool. Nokia does a lot of stuff. They just don't do any one thing very well, which is what happens when you do a whole bunch of stuff. They do have web technology called WRT, which is jQuery based, so it looks pretty cool and it's quite interesting. Problem is nobody has Nokia phones in North America. A lot of people in Europe do, so it is worth watching. It's kind of interesting. And then there's the Palm Pre, which is coming out soon. It looks like they may have nailed it with their programming model, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, we've seen this kind of thing happen before. Platform fragmentation is not news to web developers, and well, it's never going to work. So what do? Well, you use the web to solve this problem. This slide's awesome because check, this tank has a greater than sign. Fuck yeah, right? And that's like the internet isn't really like it's kind of like C programmers will speak derisively about your little web app or whatever, but writing in C is really cool and it's really performant and it has a time and place, but that time and place, it's got nothing on this tank, man. Like, anyways, whatever. So I thought I might be the first guy with a lolcat, and I was kind of bitter that I wasn't, but that's okay. People say you shouldn't have a lolcat in your presentation. That's bullshit. Lolcats are awesome. So yeah, anyway, so we're pretty sure that this internet thing's going to work out. And so when the iPhone was released, that was like this marker got thrown on the ground. Okay, here we are. The mobile web has finally arrived. Fuck, I've been waiting for this forever. They roll it out and they're like, hey, you're going to do all your apps with web technology. We're like, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And then the whole community went, no, we want to do native apps. We want to do it with Objective-C. And then we're like, well, wait, no, we don't want to do that actually, but people did. And so our team was actually really disheartened by this because a lot of work had gone into Webkit to make it quite powerful. And we think Apple was planning on releasing a lot more features into it. Who knows? It's all speculation. But when the SDK came out, I'll go back. So the SDK came out, we started to look at it closely, and we're like, how can we still do web development with the iPhone but take advantage of the native features? And it turns out a lot of this stuff is built in. And so Beer being a primary motivator at Nitobi, this is Brock Whitten. He's one of our main developers, and he came up with the whole PhoneGap concept at iPhone Dev Camp, and they had free beer, so he got a lot of work done, and that's where PhoneGap came from. So our philosophy with PhoneGap, and this is probably a little bit unintuitive to a Western audience, but it's like an Eastern Zen philosophy, Taoist kind of thing. We don't actually want this project to have to exist, and if it ceases to exist, we'll have been successful. Because what we really want to see happen is web technology to be treated as a first-class citizen on devices, right? We know it's never going to fucking happen in the short term, so we have to do it ourselves. I think I wrote this slide last night too. PhoneGap lets you access the native features on the phone, and by native features, I mean pretty much anything that the phone can do, we want to expose back to JavaScript. And, oh God. I think I was trying to remind myself that, yeah, so it's open source, it's MIT licensed. We want you to take our code, we want you to fork it, we want you to work on it. We don't want to have any barrier to adoption. We want to see people use it and change it and modify it and do whatever. So why would we do that? It's kind of crazy. It makes no sense at all. The reason we're doing it is because we're web developers, right? We want to see the web succeed. And well, that's pretty easy to say because it's probably going to work out. Like I said before, this whole internet thing is obviously not going to go anywhere but progress the state-of-the-art forward, and we all win in that case. So here's PhoneGap right now. We have it working on the iPhone, the Android, and the BlackBerry with identical APIs. Bam! It's my only animation, I promise you. This is PhoneGap really soon. So you want to see that again? Bam! I'm going to make up for lack of content with effects. So yeah, we've got on the iPhone, the Android, the BlackBerry. We're looking at, you know what else is cool too about this that you have to note is that Webkit is on all of these devices except for the BlackBerry. So that makes our job a little bit easier, and it also gives us better rendering engines. And I'm not a Webkit fanboy, it's just the reality. Okay, so let's move on. Actually, you might have a question about that. You're thinking, Windows Mobile has Webkit? And actually, yes, you can build Webkit onto Windows Mobile. The thing is, nobody really owns a Windows Mobile phone, so no one knows that you can do that. Microsoft talks about how they ship so many of these Windows Mobile SDKs because they count Visual Studio as a shipment of their SDK. So, and it's a free download with the .NET framework, whatever. So another way to look at this too is site-specific browsers, which is kind of an interesting thing. There's lots of ways to do these things. Maybe the browser vendors should also be considering giving us better access to our devices. And for example, like if I could use my phone to take a picture, I can use Flash to take a picture, and all of our laptops have cameras built in. Well, why can't I do that with JavaScript? It's an interesting question. So I don't have an answer for that, by the way. I don't work on browsers, but So this is also another interesting recent development. Apple came out with an app store. Facebook went, oh, why didn't we do that? And then all of a sudden, all the other mobile carriers jump on. They release app stores. And now Nintendo just announced they're doing an app store, which is cool and interesting because the DS is a mobile device. So there's a lot of opportunity there, too. And you probably don't want to develop your app that many times to get it to market, right? So how do you make money? As software developers, this is the last thing we think about half of the time. But it's worth thinking about, actually, it turns out. So you can do advertising your apps in all these app stores. There's apps that have examples of that. There's freemium apps, which means apps kind of free, but you have to pay for an upgrade of some sort. Subscription-based apps we don't see in the App Store, and they're discouraged, but there are ways around that, such as releasing a single app for everything. Like there's 10 comic book apps or something like that, so it's kind of like a subscription. Value-add type apps, I have no idea what I was thinking there. Who knows? You can probably come up with something. The App Store right now is full of these iFart type apps, and this is just an unfortunate fact of the market that if you're going to develop something for the iPhone, you're going to run into a lot of barriers with the time and cost to development, and then the price is getting so low that you wouldn't want to develop something that has like a 6-month dev schedule with a team of 5 guys. You're not going to make any money, and that's just an interesting thing to note. Using web technology, you can actually take that time way down, and you might be able to build more competitive apps, and you don't have to worry about the iFart pricing model. Something we're seeing happen recently, and it's kind of interesting, there's niche type apps coming up now. And by niche apps, I mean apps that are really narrowly focused for specific audiences. So one example I saw recently was an interior decorator app, and you can drag around like couches and plants, and it was like $10, right? And I would never buy that, but a lot of people probably would because they like to move their couches. I don't know. Yeah, and then the last way to make money is to write apps for other people, which is what you're probably doing, or I'm doing. So one other thing to note about PhoneGap is a good way to look at something is to talk about what you're not going to do. And so we're not trying to build hardcore games. We're not building another browser, and we're not focused on substandard devices. So and by substandard devices, I mean anything that isn't going to be able to compile and run an instance of a browser. Our goal is to stay as close to the HTML5 spec as possible, which is a moving target. And also HTML5, that doesn't really have anything to do with JavaScript, but it does, kind of, right? So things like geolocation. But I don't think the guys at W3C are thinking about accelerometers, even though every computer has one. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So we're trying to make our API as close as possible to how the web itself will probably evolve. So let's get into some code. I put this unicorn up here for you, Tom. This is a really simple, basic example of doing geolocation with PhoneGap. We start off with the debugger, which will come back into Apple's Xcode. Say we're going to get your current location. We start, when an app asks you, can this person use or can this app use your location? Well, that's what's going on. We say navigator.notification.activity start. We've got a success callback or a win callback, and we've got a fail callback. That's it. That's how you access geolocation with PhoneGap. It's pretty simple. Accelerometer was the next thing that we added pretty much immediately, and I don't think it can get much simpler than that. There's a function here called round number, which I forgot to strip out, but it was just like a helper function inside this method. As these examples go on, you'll see that I've got pretty much, we have the same convention all the way through, where we'll say navigator dot whatever the feature is, and then a callback function, and we'll have success, a failure function, and then any options, which passes an object literal. we've recently added contact support. It's still a little fuzzy, but it's also quite powerful and interesting. We just return, well, the first time we added it, all we did was return an array of objects. That made a lot of sense. And then this guy hit the mailing list, and he's like, well, I have 6,000 contacts in my phone. And we're like, fuck, dude. Like, I've got like 8. But so we had to think that one through, because you don't want to load that many people into an instance of Webkit. Actually, you can. It just takes forever. So we've reworked the API with these constraints in mind. I don't even know. I added this because I thought it'd be funny last night. Apparently. Whatever. So you can do other stuff with PhoneGap. We have a whole bunch of notification events. The different devices have different ways of notifying you different stuff. And so that's a really complex sentence for a simple idea. You've got, like, on the BlackBerry, you got all these little lights that you can make blink for whatever reason if you were, inclined to do so. Android, same kind of thing. We can play almost any audio. In the iPhone SDK, there is a restriction that we can't play anything more than 30 seconds. So you can loop and you can get clever with that. There's obviously ways around that, but we're trying to keep PhoneGap within the sphere of Apple's legalese, which is a labyrinthy maze at best, but it's an interesting thing. And you can play most video files as well, which is kind of cool. So PhoneGap is quite adopted. We don't know how adopted exactly because it's MIT licensed. When people do want to promote to us, they'll tell us. We know there's a minimum of 50 apps in the App Store. So that's kind of cool and rather interesting. There's lots of forks on GitHub. So if you're on GitHub, we encourage you to get up there and take it for yourself. So web apps are pretty easy to build when it's just the client-side code. And that's all you have to deal with when you're building a PhoneGap application. So I couldn't really get deeply into this, but I'm fairly certain most people here are comfortable with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm just going to talk quickly about some of the neat capabilities. Oh yeah, and I'm going to do a little Webkit fanboy bit here. Webkit is winning. It's just a fact. It's an amazing browser. It's fast. It's got a tiny footprint, and if you build your app correctly, you cannot distinguish a web app from a native application with Webkit. And that's just a fact. And the quickest, easiest way to build a web app right now is with Dashcode. How many people here even know Dashcode exists? Yeah, right? It's kind of interesting because Apple spent a lot of time on it, and it has a way to publish a web app. It's not just for publishing dashboard widgets, and when you do it, it does it to the dimensions of an iPhone. And it's got libraries for all the native controls that you have on an iPhone, but done with JavaScript and HTML, CSS. So that's kind of an interesting thing. It got overshadowed. When the SDK came out, nobody noticed this. It came out, and I think they announced it at the same time, and everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever, Dashcode. I can't wait to get into this Objective-C, man. It's going to be awesome. So it's worth checking out. The only problem with it, though, is if you build an app using Dashcode, it's not going to work the same in Android. And it probably won't even be able to load inside of whatever browser that BlackBerry is currently using. So that's something to note. IUI. I like IUI. I think it's really cool. It's developed by Joe Hewitt, who you have to respect as one of probably the best mobile developers out there. It really hasn't seen any love. It doesn't take advantage of CSS transitions, and so it looks sort of, I don't know if you've seen an IUI app, but it looks choppy and clunky, and it's based on linked lists, which gets boring really fast if you're just like going through like list after list after list. Like, okay, that's it. That's all there is in this app. So it's worth looking at. There's a new one called Magic Framework. It's jQuery based. It's pretty simple, and it's a lot like IUI. It's worth looking at if you're going to build a mobile web app. jqTouch is probably the hottest one right now that everybody's getting into using. It is also jQuery based, and it's quite fast. A problem with jQuery on the phone is that it's huge. And that's not such a problem, but it takes a long time to load, and you pay a performance penalty up front for that. When it loads that JavaScript into the interpreter, there's this almost like a shrug while the phone gets used to the idea that it's got all this code inside of it. And so you don't actually need a lot of that code unless you're using something like jqTouch. We developed our own little mini solution to it, which we called XUI. And it's experimental. It's almost identical syntax to jQuery, except for it's 2K instead of 24K or whatever jQuery gzips down to. And that leaves you room for your app logic, so you can load your app really quickly. You can build whatever it is you're doing in a familiar way, because we're used to using jQuery. And you don't have the performance overhead of it. Something else worth doing if you haven't is, and this seems like heresy, I think everyone should try and write their own framework before they jump into using a framework. That's, why would you do that? That's crazy. Well, as a practitioner of the craft of building web apps with the lingua franca, whatever that word, with JavaScript, it's almost your job to know it and understand it. If you don't know about query selector all, you're missing out. It's really cool technology. It's interesting. You don't need sizzle half of the time. If you don't use document get element by ID, then you probably don't like typing, and I don't blame you. But you should try rolling your own at least once. Something else, it's tricky to build web apps for the iPhone because the screen resolution is so small. The emulators are really not good at emulating what the phone experience is exactly like. And so you do a lot of this sort of build and then test on your phone, then build, then test on your phone. If you write unit tests up front, you're going to save yourself time later. And if you're using Firebug Lite and embed it inside the browser, you can get a good idea of what's going on. That's all I have on that. So. Somebody was talking about hoverboards last night, which is kind of cool. What's coming next with PhoneGap? Oh yeah, so it's not just about phones. There's a lot more to mobile devices than just phones, and Nintendo DS is a pretty good example of this. It has a browser. It's a little mini platform unto itself. We're seeing the internet kind of pervade areas that we hadn't thought it would, or at least we didn't know it was going to, and we want to be cognizant of that. I don't know why there's an Ewok there. Something we're exploring is Gecko rendering. The reason for this is because Webkit is winning. So we're looking at potential of using Gecko and making it the rendering engine and making that transparent. We've had some success with the iPhone, not so much with Android. You can build Gecko to Windows Mobile, which is cool. Fennec is a browser for Windows Mobile that's based on Firefox. So that's something we're looking at. I don't know. More devices. BlackBerry, please. Oh yeah, I had a BlackBerry because we've been trying to get a hold of someone at BlackBerry and ask them why they don't use a real browser, and they won't get back to us on that. So maybe they will. Open toolchain, something else we're looking at adding right now. If you want to build an iPhone app, you need a Mac, and like Mac users are such a minority. We want to make sure that we can also help out our friends in the Windows world, Linux too. Yeah, so this is also something cool that we've been working on recently, and I'm going to jump out and we were trying to name it. I wanted to call it the stimulator, but nobody was into it. No, I have no spaces. There we go. So this is pretty cool, actually. This is the PhoneGap Simulator. If I want to watch the accelerometer, we can use this little guy over here. This is an Adobe Air application, by the way. I would have built it with, or we would have built it with Titanium, but you can't do this cool paper vision 3D like rotation stuff with Titanium, at least not yet to my knowledge. Geolocation is not going to work. I think it beeped. Yeah, it's not very exciting, whatever. Vibrate, blink, you know, I mean, this is pretty basic stuff. There's like a nifty way to like move it around and get orientation change events. We can change the skin to like an Android to get an idea of like what that's going to look like, you know. Or, you know, we're a masochist. We can also change the skin to BlackBerry Bold, which, you know, that's probably how it will render in a BlackBerry Bold. The Palm Pre. Oh, yeah, that's hot.
Gee, what do you want to buy?
Yeah, man. Anyway, so back to the old iPhone. I think, yeah, we've got some other demos in here too. So like this is, and I can show you the source code in a second. This is, can you guys see that ball on there? It's not showing up super well, but we built this little game with like hardly any JavaScript at all. And, you know, that's not very exciting. Let me show you the other one. This is way cooler. This is actually hard. Well, I have a difficult time with it, but, you know, so I'm using the accelerometer to navigate this dude around, and if I hit the spikes, it vibrates. So that's pretty gnarly. This thing's going to be completely open source too. We're going to release this on GitHub, let anyone work on it. We're embedding Firebug Lite inside of it as well, so you can do any kind of debugging that you're used to, probably in that side pane, and then just use the other side to interact with. The code for that first demo, I mean, it's not the most beautiful code, but that's it right there. So all we're doing is watch. I have no idea what's going on with the indentation. All we're doing is watching the accelerometer. We never fail, apparently. And yeah, then we just move the ball around using this method right here. There's no frameworks. There's no real magic. It's just simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Here's the other game with the vibrate built in. I mean, that's not much code for the effect, and it's pretty hard to tell once that's running on the actual device that it's, pretty hard to tell that it's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so that's pretty cool. We're working on a whole bunch of interfaces right now for PhoneGap, and really we're driven purely by a need to try impossible bullshit. And so we're looking at adding speech API. Google Android has this, or the new SDK has a speech API, but it's not real time, and so that's not good enough. We're looking at adding a couch-like SQLite wrapper. It'd be even cooler if we could add couch itself. Chris. We're looking at adding a sockets API, file I/O. You can already send telephone events back through PhoneGap, so you can invoke like the phone interface and an SMS interface just via an href. So you just do tel:// and the telephone number, boom, you'll pop it open. So that's kind of cool. We want to actually make that even more interesting and add programmatic access from JavaScript. So you can build gnarly auto dialers or something, I don't know. Another friend of ours back in Vancouver added Facebook Connect, which is neat. So you can do your authentication with Facebook. You may as well. Everyone has it, I guess. This is the last bullet here is really new, and I didn't even know it was coming until like 2 days ago. We had a fork happen. A friend of ours in Vancouver decided to just go gonzo, and he added half of the native controls that are available, and you just add them back into your PhoneGap application using CSS. So if you want a native tab bar, you can just say class tab bar, and then a list items inside of it. Links will be the links that you can use in like the bottom tab bar. It's a little bit of a tricky one though, because you can't do that kind of cross-platform stuff. the controls that are native to an iPhone are native to the iPhone. You're not going to see those on an Android. So we want to be cognizant of that when you're doing development, but some people just don't care, and they want to build iPhone apps. So here's some resources. I'm going to put these slides online anyways. You'll be able to find them. You don't need to like quickly jot all this down. We need your help because we're not a big company, and the project is ambitious at best. We especially need documentation. It tends to be a problem. Tests, specs, code, ideas. We want to see people fork it on GitHub and take PhoneGap in directions that we don't expect it to go in. And that's where all the cool stuff happens to us. So please do take our code and do something with it and let us know about it. More resources. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Yes?
SQLite support, is that iPhone specific or is that all the time?
It's in Android. There is no SQLite support inside BlackBerry.
But it is on iPhone though?
iPhone and Android. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I agree that the web apps are cool, but the problem is they don't work when you go offline, low bandwidth, go to the metro. What kind of support is that?
There's full offline support for PhoneGap. So let me show you.
That's probably part of the courtesy of having SQLite, right?
Yeah, partly. Yeah, I'll just pop the whole tree open. So when you download the PhoneGap source, can you guys see that? Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's pretty straightforward. We've got a JavaScript directory which has a whole bunch of interfaces. So this isn't implemented. This is just an interface. So this is how you take a picture of the camera, for example, and then it gets implemented different ways for different platforms. In the case of the iPhone, we have a www folder. That example app that I was showing, this is it right here. It's all offline. And so, yeah.
When you deploy the app, that goes with it?
Yeah.
Can you update that remotely?
Yeah, you could if you wanted to. You'd have to code that into your logic when you build it, but it's fully doable. Some people just use this HTML file as like kind of a shell, and then they'll keep all their assets in an SQLite database and eval them when the phone starts up. And then you could do like a callback to the server, say, hey, is there a new version? Cool, update this database, boom, run the app. So offline's fully supported. Is there any other questions? Yeah.
So when you're running an application in PhoneGap, when it's being executed, is it actually being executed in JavaScript and everything?
Yeah, it's an instance of Webkit.
So any application you're building, it's everything that's running in Webkit.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking at any options to like say be able to have this build down to native code?
Well, it uses the SDK, the iPhone SDK. So at the end of the day, it is native code, I guess, underneath it all.
I think what I mean is like I could actually write an application using PhoneGap and JavaScript and have access to the control because it's the language that to me is a little cleaner maybe than just C, right?
Yeah.
And then, but actually have that compiled down to a native application that runs. That's not running through Webkit. It's actually running native on the phone. I don't know if that's something you guys are looking at.
Well, that is how it works. Like it's a native Springboard app. It's a Chromeless instance of Webkit with native features just injected. Like we pollute the JavaScript with, awesome, basically. Yeah.
So you're looking to support the pre when it comes out.
Totally.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's already, it's going to be built on that same stack. So I guess will PhoneGap basically just do a simple little transform? What's the benefit of using PhoneGap if you're going to target?
Yeah. So we're writing a shim for the Mojo SDK so that your code would be portable between iPhone, Android, pre. So that's our approach there. Is there any other question? Yeah.
Yeah. As I understand it, you build a web app, and you're going to compile it down and install just that app, kind of in a native form through the store. Say if you're working with say for targeting the iPhone.
Yeah.
But if you say want to use it more as a platform, is anybody or have you guys kind of, what you're doing is you're bridging the gap that the operators or that the native browsers don't allow you access to the native services.
Sure.
And, there's movements to try to push that to build like basically build cooler web apps that can kind of do that hybrid thing that you're providing. Has anybody or been able to get through, say, the Apple Store, kind of more of a platform type of application that would allow you to, say, if you had multiple business or multiple applications that you wanted to code to that API, in a sense, you're kind of installing a browser kind of platform.
Like a wrapper of some kind. Yeah, there's a couple examples of this where people are, because PhoneGap works in, there's two ways when you're actually building the app. You can point at a remote URL or you can do it offline. And there are apps in the store that like point to a remote URL, and you could use this in a shady way, right? You could have your kittens app and then turn it into like nasty porn app in a week if you wanted to. But I don't think no one's done that yet. But there have been examples where people have progressively enhanced their apps over time and added like new functionality and features, and you could almost turn it into like a mini portal for whatever specific. So people have done it, and you could do that, and Apple's let stuff through that is like that.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I mean, one of the things we were talking to some folks recently about is doing that. Install an app that kind of starts with a single focus, but they could add more capabilities to it. Essentially, becomes more of a launcher of their own private suite of mobile applications. So
it's totally doable. Yeah. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I had a follow-up based on that, which my understanding was that Apple restricted you from running anything that would allow us from running any like scripting languages on the iPhone.
They do, except for they ship with Webkit, which is got JavaScript core or scroll, whatever. So it's fully allowed by the SDK. Is there another question? Yeah.
Is there going to be feature detection booleans in the API? So, for instance, you were saying some of the phones didn't support SQLite. Would be some sort of availability to say if SQLite supported equal to true, then do so and so? Yeah,
totally. We've got device and platform always return back, and you can test against that. Although it would probably make more sense if you depend on a specific feature to test the feature returns null or something like that.
So it'd be dependent on, you'd have to say if you have Navigator Lightberry, then SQLite not usable instead of SQLite support is equal to true or something such.
Yeah. It'd be up to you to do that. Although I would like to entertain better ways of doing that.
I didn't really get it. Once you make the application with PhoneGap, are you installing a new browser on the phone, or are you using the browser that's already on the phone?
You're using the browser that's already on the phone, or you're using an instance of the browser that's on the phone. So you're building it like a native app, and it'll have like an icon on the springboard in the case of Android and iPhone apps, and it'll be just like another native app, except for it's really just a windowed browser or a Chromeless browser.
So if you wanted to expose more native functionality as an app author, you could drop down into Objective-C and write that?
Yes, and we encourage people to do that. Totally, and it's really simple the way that it's architected. You can add the features, and when you call them from JavaScript, it just mimics the Objective-C. So we look for a call if it's not. It's almost like a method missing in Ruby. Similar kind of delegate approach.